Dear church, let's talk global preacher training with Keith Kasarja. Hello, welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley. Excited about my guest today. We haven't had Keith on before, but I know many of our viewers and listeners know Keith Kasarja. Keith, thank you so much for taking time out of your travels to be with us.
Oh, hey, I'm happy to be with you. I really appreciate the invitation, and I've been looking forward to it.
Yes, and so just to make sure, I know you're always traveling. You are in the States right now, right?
I am. I'm in the States. I got your invitation when I wasn't in the States, but it's convenient that I'm here now.
Hey, tell us a little bit about your work, because if people are like me, they see on Facebook and social media you traveling all over. It seems like you're gone all the time. What exactly is the work you do with Bear Valley? Define it for us. Bring it all down to a level that we can understand it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, Bear Valley Bible Institute began in 1965, training preachers primarily for the Western U.S. But in 97, the idea came about, hey, what if we took the same model to other places? Historically, we've had a hit and miss track record of bringing guys over. Some don't want to go back. Some do go back, but they're different when they go back. And so what we do is we take the model, preacher training model, to the local place in their culture and using their instructors. Very few of the courses are actually taught by foreigners. They're all vetted, of course, and academically qualified and otherwise, but try to train them where they are to reach their own people. And it's been incredibly successful.
Yeah, one of the things you said to me off camera is that your goal, or the goal, is to make mission work obsolete. Talk a little bit about that. I love that concept.
Yeah, well, what we think of as mission work is, and it's almost automatically, we think of an American going to a foreign country for a short period of time. There are actually among us now, very few missionaries, true go and live there missionaries anymore. So there's a lot of mission trips, good people who mean well, want to help. But what if we could just funnel those resources into empowering and training the people where they are, where you would be going to? And so that's what we're trying to do. And we've got a lot of prayers and partnership to help make that happen. We're currently working with 62 schools of preaching that are in 31 different countries. And already this morning working on some more. And the need is great. The product, if you will, has been incredibly effective and successful. Our students, not graduates, but our students, enrolled students, have baptized 17,000 souls in the last 5 years.
Wow.
And that's while they are in school. And so we're reaching them in their culture, and most of their cultures are very fertile soil. And so it is just it's a win-win situation.
Yeah. So talk about those different preaching schools in these different countries. How far and wide are we talking?
How far and wide?
Yeah. So what's the most remote? Give us an idea of where these are at.
Yeah, well, a lot of them we have regions, mainly every region in Africa is covered by multiple schools except North Africa. That's a bit off limits as far as northern in Africa. Chad would perhaps be the most northern part, but many schools in West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, schools in India, Ukraine. Ukraine is believe it or not, the school in Ukraine has barely stopped during the war. They're still going. It's challenging, and but they're still going. Schools in Asia, like places like Myanmar and Cambodia, there's a school in Fiji and New Zealand. And so basically the sun never sets on what we're doing. I wake up every morning to messages from colleagues. I go to sleep every night sending a reply. Somebody asked me one time, what's the hardest part of your job? It's the fact that my colleagues never sleep. Yeah. In 31 countries, somebody's always awake. And so it's an incredible opportunity that the sun never sets on the work that we're doing.
Yeah. And so are you visiting every one of these preaching schools in a year or every 2 years? What is the schedule like?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's not possible to visit those. I'm typically in about 15 to 20 different countries per year. And usually when I'm in a country, there's multiple stops in that country. So some of my travel is for visiting existing schools, but at least probably half of it is new school development. Our protocol is that in addition to the due diligence and the vetting and the survey that I have, if it's determined this may be a good possibility, then it's required that I make a survey trip and go check it out. And so I'm going to guess half maybe of my travel is for that purpose as well. Now, sometimes they combine. I may go to this place. In fact, the communication I was involved in first thing this morning, possible new school in a country where we already have two schools. And so if I go there, I'll be doing the new school thing and I'll be visiting the existing school as well.
And so how often are you gone and how often are you home? Like, what is your schedule like? You're gone for so long, you're home for so long. What does that look like?
Yeah, it goes in spurts. It's been a really busy 4 months. The first 4 months of this year, I think I've been in 11 countries and flown close to 75,000 miles. And
wow.
That's not usual. I will not be duplicating that every 4 months. But it goes in spurts, and a lot of it's just need based. And so I'm home for a little while now, and really the last quarter of the year is probably going to be pretty busy. In the middle somewhere is not so much. So it really just goes in spurts. Some people think I'm just gone all the time, and I'm really not. I also have a self-imposed maximum trip of 2 weeks. And my wife's not asked me to do that, but that's just my own limit. It's going to be 2 weeks and I'm going to be back. And it's usually less than 2 weeks actually, but these are usually really busy, intense times. It's not uncommon that like in a 12-day trip, I might spend at least one night in 6 or 7 different places. And so there's a lot of in and out going. Every mode of transportation known to man, I've been on. Planes, trains, automobiles, you name it. So yeah, it's but all of that's necessary because number one, you just can't really know what you're getting into with a new school situation unless you're just boots on the ground. There's only so much you can know from email and pictures. And also the schools that are going along, we need to know they're up to our standards. We need to know that they're really doing what we intend for them to do. And one of the things that I do at least once a year is I do a drop-in surprise visit on a school somewhere. They don't know I'm coming. They don't know I'm in their country. I know I have their class schedule, so I know where they're supposed to be, but they have no idea where I'm supposed to be. And because that's really the only way you're going to know what's going on when you're not there or when they're not expecting you. And so, and that's just the importance of boots on the ground. And so it is not just me traveling. I have an assistant director who's often traveling. We have multiple coordinators. We have regional directors, lots of boots on the ground throughout the year visiting these different schools, making sure they have what they need to do the job, also making sure they're doing the job.
I can bet that it's quite an adjustment when you go to these places, depending on where it's at, the food, the travel you mentioned, the accommodations. I'm sure some of them are a little better than others or worse than others and all that. Talk about the getting used to the travel part of it, and for 12 days or however long it is, acclimating to that culture and making sure that you're not getting sick and all that kind of stuff. That's got to be a little bit of a challenge, is it?
Well, by now, I'm not new at this anymore. I've been doing this full-time for 12 years, but even before that, I've been involved in international preacher training for 25 years. Even when I was in local work, I was in local work for 20 years, but a lot of those years I was still doing this sort of as a part of my ministry. So it's not new anymore. So I do know some things to not do. You be careful about water. Water is the big one. I've had malaria. So I keep the malaria meds at home because you don't want to discover you have malaria in this country. This is the worst place in the world to have malaria because we don't have the medicine for it.
Right.
But water is the real scary one. anything with mosquitoes and water, you have to be careful about that. I travel with Cipro. First sign of anything, I'm taking Cipro, and I usually buy it in country because it's available everywhere.
Yeah.
I've got my sleep routines. Fatigue will wear you out. I remember one time landing on the other side of the world and went immediately to a school board meeting. And I think I'm doing it's a pretty miserable thing to, you got to stay awake, but you're having trouble doing it. And I thought I baked it pretty well. And when we finished, one of our directors said, "I see you're having trouble staying awake." I said, "Yeah, do you think?" So fatigue is one of those things. And, you make sure you don't use the water for brushing teeth. You make sure you keep your mouth closed tight when you're showering. But overall, it's fine. And I don't want to be a foreigner. I want to be we're going to be better partners and coworkers and colleagues if you don't see me as a foreigner. So I'm not going to be turning up my nose at your food. Now, there are going to be some I diplomatically pass on because I think it may not be the wisest thing, but I don't want to be the American that needs some kind of, I want to be, we're brethren, and one of the things that I love that I've learned over the years is people are people, and I've stayed in their homes and I've eaten at their tables, and I know their children, and their children, call me Uncle Keith and, whatever. And I mean, that's just, that's one of the blessings of it. So I would never want to just completely insulate myself from the local situation. On the other hand, you do have to be wise.
Yeah. Yeah. What is where's the farthest your travels have taken you? We talk about these preaching schools. What's the longest trip that you have to make to go check on a school?
Well, at some point you can't go any further. And so sometimes, like even this year already, I've gone about as far as you can go to the west, to the Philippines. Okay. And then 2 months later, I went about as far as you can go east to East India. If you look at the map, there's a little speck between India and Southeast Asia where I've not been this year. And so, but for one of those you go to the west, one of those you go to the east, and it just if you want to calculate actual flying time, I'm going to say 20 hours is about where you max out. In this world, and what a time to be alive with the air travel that we have. I mean, so it's 14 hours to Seoul and another 4 hours to Manila. I have a connection from where I live. So 20 hours, and probably about the same to India. So it's going to be about 20 flying hours is going to be about the max, but I do that multiple times a year. If it's 8 hours or less, I call it a short flight. And there are a lot of times I have back-to-back 8 hours. So it's 8 hours in Amsterdam and then connect 8 hours to Nairobi or wherever. So it just is what it is. And it's just part of the job. Some people are fascinated by it. They want to know how many miles I've flown. And for me, it's just a part of the job. It's not an accomplishment.
No, I'm that person, Keith. I'm the one that's fascinated by it because I can't imagine. I'm not a scared flyer, but I can't imagine being on a plane for 20 hours or, well, I guess the longest
16.
Stretch, 16, can't imagine that. So, it's fascinating to me. But, it's probably, well, not probably. I know you're this way. I kind of get this way when I'm doing a longer flight. I've done like a 10-hour, 11-hour flight. You have to remind yourself you're going to do a job. This is a mission. This is remember what it's for, but I don't know that anybody enjoys being on a plane for that long. But I'm one that's fascinated by that. That's why I asked that. But this is old hat for you. You've done this enough times. It's not even anything.
Yeah. It's I'm probably a little more than 3 million miles, and but again, that's not an accomplishment. It just kind of comes with it. If you were to ask, if people got cubicle hours or something, they would have racked up a few million by now too. So
sure.
It's just a part of the job. But man, what a time to be alive. I think about what Paul had to go through in a shipwreck and all that just to go no distance at all. I remember one time flying to Tanzania, and it was back-to-back 8-hour flights. and then took a train, so 16 hours of flying, and then took a train that took 18 hours.
Wow.
And I was still in the same country. And so you think, wow, what a time to be alive. We can cover a lot of ground in the shortest time possible ever.
Absolutely. So, Keith, when you are on the ground and you're going to these various preaching schools, you talked a little bit about the survey and all that, but let's say we have an established preaching school that you're going to check up on. Maybe you showed up, covertly, and you're checking on them. What exactly is it that you're talking to them about, and talk a little bit about the direction, the things that you're instructing them on to make sure that things are going in the right direction?
Yeah, well, we have academic standards and minimum requirements and things like that we expect to be met, and they know what those are. Those are communicated. But one thing that you can do is you can stop in and say, "Hey, let me see the last exam that you gave," and you can see how it is, because anyone who's taught, whether you're talking about a public school teacher or even a Sunday school teacher, you can teach the same subject at a very, variety of levels. And this is, college level training that we're doing. And so we need to make sure that that it's happening. We have a standardized syllabi, and in that syllabi, or in the syllabi, the syllabus spells out the student learning outcomes and what we expect every student to know, no matter where they take this class, how we're going to assess that knowledge and those kind of things. So the syllabus spells out our expectations. What we need to make sure is that it's actually happening on the ground. And so that's one of the things I want to look for. I want to talk to the students. What's your experience been like? Get a feel for the morale around there. Leadership often determines morale. Also, sometimes conditions determine morale. There have been times where students were just fed up because they were eating the same food every single day. And it might have been pretty easy to just change it up a little bit. And so there's a variety of things to look for, but the one I can best get a grasp on is the academics and how those are coming along.
Yeah. Yeah. So I assume there's some challenges. There's some things that maybe don't always go so well. I guess I'm asking the stress of the situation when you have to go in there and, I don't know about pull the plug, but maybe make some changes and things like that. Is that a common occurrence? Is that something that has to happen, or are you pretty well think that you got it running like a well-oiled machine?
Yeah, it isn't common, but yeah, there are times it has to happen. We've in the last year or two, we've had to replace 2 different directors. And see, these are things that you wouldn't know if you didn't have your finger on the pulse. And so what a lot of churches and well-meaning people do is we're going to send some money to this thing, but they really have no mechanism of making sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. And so it could go on. For example, I'll tell you a horror story, not related to us, thankfully, but I know of 4 preacher training schools in a certain country that will remain unnamed on camera that had no students. They had no students. They had found a way, the support comes in, and when they are expecting the foreign visitor to come, the once every 2 year thing, they use some of that money to pay some people to come sit in class for a week.
Wow.
And see, the congregations that were funding this had no idea. And a representative of one of the congregations that found out about us was telling me about their situation. So you don't know unless you know, right? And there's really no way to know if they know you're coming. And so that's why you just have to have boots on the ground. We require regular communication, school reports, updates, all these things, and there's no reason not to. I mean, the easiest way to communicate in the history of mankind is today: email, text, WhatsApp. And so having all of those things in place has given us a really good expectation that what's happening, what's supposed to happen, is happening. But occasionally, we find that it isn't, and we have to make some changes.
Yeah, Keith, talk a little bit about your acceptance in these countries. Have you found that some of the places that you're at or that you've visited have been hostile towards you or Christianity? I mean, I know the schools are, but has it been difficult in some of the areas to promote Christianity through the preaching schools?
Not really. There are places where we wish we could have more of an impact, but it's just not going to be allowed.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, we have some schools in predominantly Muslim places that are fine because it's a secular Muslim. And so we do just fine. We got a school in a city of 500,000 that's 95% Muslim.
Okay.
And we get along just fine. They've got a sign out there. We started a new school in Chad that's French-speaking and Muslim. And so that's not an issue, but if you went to a politically Muslim place, you would not be allowed to do anything. It'd be really dangerous. But most of the places where we work, it's because we are able to work there and make an impact there. And in those places, there's really not a problem. And personally, as a foreigner and as somebody who looks different than nearly everywhere I go, no problems at all. And even among those that I think the average American, for example, I don't like doing this, but I'll single out, I think the average American is perhaps afraid of the average Muslim, for example.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's no reason to be. I mean, people are people. And I have eaten meals with them, and I have, sat next to them on planes. And just 2 weeks ago, I was in an airport, and a Muslim woman and her baby we're sitting next to each other, and we chatted, and I just happened to pull out pictures of my grandsons and show her, and she smiled, and we got each other's, grandchildren, or her daughter and my grandchildren's names. And, people are people. And basically, if you act like you ought to act, you're not going to face any mistreatment. I haven't. There's places I need to be more aware of my surroundings, but as far as being mistreated or treated unkindly, not. In fact, if anything, sometimes better. I'm treated better than maybe if I was from wherever it is I am.
Yeah, that makes the experience a whole lot more worthwhile, I guess. I know it can probably seem like a job, and with the travel and everything, you can tire out quickly, but there's got to be a lot of reward, right? I mean, talk a little bit about that, just the reward of going and seeing these schools flourishing and doing well, and these young men growing in their faith, but also growing in their craft. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. Because, by now we've been doing this so long, there are what I call second generation Bear Valley schools where graduates from a Bear Valley school in somewhere are now the administration in another school. In fact, just yesterday I was on a Zoom call. We had a staff meeting, and there were two guys on the call from Tanzania. They're currently in the States. And I taught both of them back like 15 years ago.
Oh,
and they're
cool.
now the co-directors of the school that they went to. And we have multiple schools where graduates and people that I taught, are they're the teachers now. And that's what we're supposed to do. Paul said to Timothy, the word you've received, you need to entrust it to others. So we're simply entrusting it to others so that they can do the same thing. And to see that happening and on a global scale it's incredibly rewarding. Some of these guys, I knew them when they were single, and I taught them, and now they have, children and their own families, and they're doing great work. And it's incredibly rewarding to see that.
Yeah. So are you still running, Keith? I know you're a half marathoner kind of guy, maybe even more than that.
Well, I have been more than that, but I'm much less than that now. I've done 7 marathons and 2 ultra marathons, but those days are behind me, and I really don't mind. I did a 50K trail for my 50th birthday. That was the only chance I'm ever going to have to do 50 for 50. Because I know I'm not doing 60 for 60, right? So I did a ultra marathon trail race for my 50th birthday, and then that pretty much ended my distance career. I just run for health and stuff, benefits that come along with it.
So you weren't sad to let it go?
No, I was in it. I was glad I did it, but man, it dominates your life. And then when I started traveling so much for marathons, I should say, half marathon, that's pretty easy. You can just kind of go do one of those. But for a marathon, it just takes over. And I remember one time I was going to be in Bangkok, and on that Saturday, I had a 14-miler on the schedule, which means I was just building up because have you run marathons?
Oh, no. No.
Oh, okay. Well, you work up to a 20 for, you'd probably do 2 or 3 20s during the training cycle, but I had to do 14. I could have run in Bangkok. I knew it. The traffic, the temperature, all that stuff. So I intentionally got a hotel that had a fitness room with a treadmill, a dreadmill. And I was like, this is going to be awful, but I got to get this 14 done. And I got up early. I just landed the night before. I didn't want to do this, but I got up, went down there, and guess what? This workout room doesn't even have AC. They just got the windows open. So we're already sitting there like heat index of 100, and I got to do 14 miles on the treadmill. Yeah, I went back to the room. It just wasn't happening.
No, I do run. I despise it. My wife is a marathoner, or has been in the past, like you. She's got left it behind. She did the Boston Marathon, and I sat at the finish line eating fried fish, waiting on her, but I'm with you on the treadmill. When I do run, it's usually on a treadmill, and I can't stand it. But I had followed you and some of your running, and I just wondered if you were still doing that. And now, what is it that you're doing for free time now when you're home? What is it? I guess spending time with grandkids and family.
Yeah, that's become a big activity. We now have one that's almost 3 years old, one that's 5 months old, and we had them this past weekend. And I do still run, and I do other things to stay in shape. One of the things about this job is you need to be in pretty good shape just to be able to do it. It's pretty grueling, and you're carrying and you're lifting and you're moving, and I have to stay in shape. So there's a number of things I enjoy doing to be able to help me stay in shape.
Sure.
And my oldest son and I golf. We do it very poorly, and nearly after every round, we ask ourselves, why do we do this to ourselves? But another son that likes to fish, and so a variety of things. Plus, honey-do list. When I come home, I make my own honey-do list, but there's usually a list of things I need to catch up on. So, yeah, lots of things. When you hit this phase of life, there's a lot going on.
Yeah. There sure is. And you and I are about the same age, and I hear all the time, this is the sweet spot and all that. And sometimes I don't feel like it is, but we're going to take advantage of it. I mean, you're not going to stop it, so why not embrace it? But hey, Keith, thanks so much for joining us today. I mean, this has been informative. It's been great. I've wanted to have you on for quite some time. And, I got to say, I really like the bald head, bearded look. I mean, who wouldn't like that, right?
I mean, of course, they don't marble top cheap furniture.
That's right.
When I'm in these developing countries, and they're very in tune with solar power, because that's for a lot of them. In fact, we have some schools that's their only power is solar. And I tell them, this is my solar panel. And they get a big kick out of that.
Yes, I love that. Well hey, thank you. Thank you so much for being on here. And I want to tell our listeners and viewers that if you have a question for Keith, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com, and I will forward it along to him, and I'm sure he'd be willing to answer any question you might have. If you want to know more about the Bear Valley Bible Institute out in Denver, then certainly email us about that as well. Great preaching school, and lots of other great things going on in the brotherhood that we love to cover, and Keith is just one part of that and doing an exceptional job. And just thank you so much for sharing your work, Keith.
Well, I appreciate that. You can go to wetrainpreachers.com if you want to look at the website and find out what's going on. But thank you for having me on. I've appreciated this podcast from a distance. And so to be on it now is a really great honor. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Keith. And thank everyone for tuning in. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.